The emergency transmission cut through the silence of deep space, traveling faster than light across the dark void between stars. On the peaceful world of Veris 3, the last broadcasting station flickered with dying power. Inside, a Virani elder named Thalen pressed his crystalline hand against the console one final time. "Please," he whispered into the microphone, his voice breaking. "Anyone who can hear this. We are dying. Our children are dying." The Krell came without warning. "They took everything. Please help us." Outside the broadcast tower, the sky burned orange and red. Krell warships hung in the atmosphere like dark clouds, their weapons carving through the city below. Buildings that had stood for 1,000 years crumbled into dust. The streets were filled with the desperate cries of families trying to flee, but there was nowhere left to run. Thalen looked through the window and saw Krell soldiers marching through the plaza. They were taking people, young and strong ones, forcing them into large metal containers. His daughter was out there somewhere. He did not know if she was still alive. The transmission continued to broadcast, sending the same message over and over into the endless dark. 17 light-years away, the Galactic Council gathered in their great chamber. It was a beautiful place, built from materials that shimmered like water and light. The representatives of 17 different species sat in their elevated seats, watching the footage from Veris 3 on massive screens. Ambassador Theron of the Luxari watched a Virani child running from an explosion. His face showed no emotion. He had seen such things before many times. The galaxy was large and terrible things happened in distant places. "The Virani chose not to join our council 3 years ago," Theron said, his voice calm and measured. "The Prime Accord is very clear. We cannot intervene in conflicts that involve worlds outside our membership. To do so would be to break the peace we have maintained for thousands of years." Another ambassador raised a concern about the Krell Dominion growing too powerful, but Theron waved this away. "The Krell will eventually exhaust their expansion. History shows us that all empires fall. We must be patient." One by one the council members voted. The holographic display showed the results. 17 votes against military intervention. 0 votes in favor. They approved an emergency aid package instead, medical supplies and food to be delivered after the conflict ended. They also issued a strongly worded statement condemning the violence. Then they adjourned for the evening meal. The transmission from Veris 3 continued into space, unanswered. On Earth, in a small monitoring station in the Australian outback, Lieutenant James Cooper sat at his desk during the night shift. It was boring work most of the time. He listened to cosmic radiation, mapped distant stars, and occasionally picked up strange signals that turned out to be nothing important. But tonight was different. His computer beeped, indicating an incoming transmission. James adjusted his headphones and listened. At first it was just static, but then he heard the voice. It was strange, not quite human, but the translation software began to work immediately. "Please. Anyone who can hear this. We are dying." James sat up straight. He pulled up the video feed and his stomach turned cold. He saw cities burning. He saw people running. He saw soldiers forcing families into containers like animals. For a long moment, James just stared at the screen. Then he did something that would change everything. He forwarded the message to his commanding officer with a simple note: "Sir, they're dying. Someone needs to see this." The message traveled up the chain of command. From the monitoring station to the Australian Defence Force. From there to the United Earth Coalition headquarters in Geneva. Within 24 hours, it reached the desks of presidents, prime ministers and military commanders around the world. The debate in the coalition chambers was fierce. Some argued that Earth had no business interfering in alien conflicts. Others said humanity was too weak, too young, too unprepared for galactic warfare. The Krell Dominion was powerful, and Earth might not survive making such an enemy. But then someone played the transmission again. Everyone in the room heard the desperate voice. They saw the children running through burning streets. They saw families torn apart. The vote was called. It was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Earth would respond. Admiral Rebecca Grant received her orders in the military command center. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen many battles. She gathered her officers and showed them the footage from Veris 3. "The Galactic Council voted to do nothing," she said. "They offered thoughts and prayers. But no action. No help." She paused and looked at each of her officers. "We're going to do something different. We're going to answer that call. Assemble every available ship. I want a fleet ready to depart in 72 hours. We're going to Veris 3. One of her officers spoke up. "Admiral, it's a 6-month journey. By the time we arrive, By the time we arrive, Grant interrupted, either we'll save whoever's left, or we'll make the Krell wish they'd never heard of humanity. Either way, someone is finally answering that distress call. The orders went out immediately. 47 ships began preparing for the longest military operation in human history. Crews said goodbye to their families. Supplies were loaded. Weapons were checked and double-checked. 3 days later, the Terran Defense Fleet left Earth orbit. They set course for a world they had never seen, to save people they had never met, because someone asked for help and everyone else said no. 6 months felt like forever. Admiral Rebecca Grant stood on the bridge of the TDS Indomitable, watching the stars blur past as her fleet traveled faster than light. Every day she wondered if they would be too late. Every night she saw the faces of those Virani children in her dreams. Finally, the navigation officer spoke. Admiral, we're approaching the Varys system. Dropping out of faster than light in 30 seconds. Grant straightened in her chair. All ships to battle stations. I want weapons ready the moment we arrive. The fleet dropped back into normal space. The main screen lit up with tactical data, and what Grant saw made her jaw clench tight. 38 Krell warships surrounded Varys, 3 like vultures circling a dying animal. The planet's surface was scarred with impact craters. Several cities were still burning. Status report, Grant demanded. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell read from her console, her voice steady despite what she was seeing. 2 million Virani confirmed dead, Admiral. Approximately 3 million have been taken to those processing centers. The Krell ships are preparing to leave the system. They're taking the survivors with them. Grant's hand tightened on her armrest. Not today, they're not. Open a channel to all Krell vessels. The communication officer worked quickly. Channel open, Admiral. A moment later, a face appeared on the main screen. It was insectoid with 4 dark eyes and clicking mandibles. This was Commander Vecnus of the Krell Dominion. He looked at the human fleet with what might have been amusement. Unknown vessels, you have entered Dominion space, Vecnus said, his voice translated into English by the computer. State your purpose or be destroyed. We have claimed this world by right of conquest. Admiral Grant leaned forward, her voice cold and clear. I am Admiral Rebecca Grant of the Terran Defense Fleet. You have exactly 60 seconds to power down your weapons and release every Virani you have taken. Comply or we will force you to comply. Commander Vecnus clicked his mandibles. It was laughter. Terrans? I have never heard of your species. You are not even part of the Galactic Council. You bring 47 small ships against the might of the Krell Dominion? This is foolishness. 59 seconds, Grant said simply. The alien's amusement faded. You dare threaten us? 58 seconds. Vecnus cut the transmission. Immediately, the Krell warships powered their weapons and began moving toward the human fleet in attack formation. Grant took a breath. All ships, this is the Admiral. Weapons free. Show them what happens when you ignore a distress call. Show them why Earth is called a death world. The battle began. The Krell had more ships and stronger shields. They had been conquering worlds for centuries. They thought this would be easy. They were very wrong. Human pilots did things that should have been impossible. They pulled their fighters through turns so sharp that the G-forces would have killed most species instantly. But humans had evolved on a heavy-gravity world with dangerous predators. Their bodies were built to survive. Lieutenant James Parker flew his fighter straight at a Krell destroyer, weapons firing continuously. At the last second, he rolled his craft and dove under the enemy ship, his missiles tearing through its weaker underbelly. The destroyer exploded in a ball of fire. That's for Varys 3, Parker shouted over the radio. The Krell tried to adapt, but they had never fought an enemy like this. Human ships worked together with perfect coordination, using tactics that the peaceful galaxy had forgotten centuries ago. They covered each other, sacrificed advantageous positions to save damaged vessels, and pressed attacks even when wounded. On the cruiser TDS Relentless, Captain Thomas Wright watched his damage reports with a sinking heart. His ship had taken 3 direct hits. The reactor was failing. Life support was gone in half the vessel. Captain, we need to evacuate, his first officer said urgently. Wright looked at the tactical display. A massive Krell carrier was moving toward the planet, preparing to bombard the remaining Virani cities. If it succeeded, millions more would die. Get everyone to the escape pods, Wright ordered. You have 30 seconds. Sir, what about you? I'm staying with my ship. Go. That's an order. The crew evacuated. Wright sat alone on the bridge of his dying vessel. He aimed the Relentless at the Krell carrier and pushed the engines to maximum thrust. The ship screamed forward, metal groaning under the stress. The Krell carrier tried to turn away, but it was too late. The Relentless struck it at full speed. Wright had one last thought of his daughter back on Earth, and then he triggered the reactor overload. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. 4,000 Krell died instantly. The carrier broke apart, its pieces burning as they fell into Varys III's atmosphere. The battle continued for 14 hours. It was brutal and bloody. The humans lost 11 ships and 4,000 brave men and women. But when the sun rose over Varys III the next morning, the orbital space was clear. 29 Krell ships were destroyed. 9 had retreated into faster-than-light, fleeing in terror. Admiral Grant led a landing party to the surface. The devastation was worse up close. Entire city blocks were rubble. The air smelled of smoke and death. But there were survivors and they were free. A Varani elder approached the landing party slowly. His crystalline body was cracked and damaged, but he was alive. He stared at Admiral Grant with wide eyes full of wonder and fear. You came?" he whispered in accented English. "The Galactic Council said no one would come. They said the Prime Accord prevented intervention. They said we were alone." Admiral Grant removed her helmet. Her face was tired, marked with soot and grief for those she had lost. But her eyes were kind. "The Galactic Council was wrong," she said quietly. "You send out a call for help. We're human. We answer." The elder began to weep. Around him, other Varani emerged from the ruins. They had been hiding, afraid the ships in orbit meant more death. But now they saw their saviors. They saw the Deathworlders who had crossed the galaxy because someone needed help. The humans had arrived. And the galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks after the Battle of Varys III, Admiral Rebecca Grant stood in the Grand Chamber of Unity. It was the most beautiful building she had ever seen, built from materials that seemed to be made of light itself. But she was not there to admire the architecture. Heavy ceremonial chains bound her wrists. They were not real restraints, she could have broken them easily, but they were a symbol that she was on trial. Around her, holographic projections showed the representatives of 17 different alien species. They sat on elevated platforms looking down at her like judges. Their faces showed different emotions. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. None looked friendly. High Chancellor Mevros spoke first. He was tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. "Admiral Rebecca Grant of Earth," he intoned formally, "you stand accused of unauthorized military action in sovereign space, violation of the Prime Accord, and the willful destruction of 37 vessels resulting in 43,000 casualties. How do you answer these charges?" Grant stood straight, meeting his gaze without fear. "Not guilty. We responded to a distress call that all of you ignored." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Ambassador Theron of the Luxari rose from his seat, his robes flowing around him like water. "The Prime Accord has maintained peace in this galaxy for 3,000 years, he shouted. "Warfare was abolished from civilized space long before your primitive species even discovered fire. Your actions have destabilized everything we have built." Destabilized. Grant's voice was calm but sharp. "Tell me, Ambassador, what was stable about watching 2 million Varani die while you debated proper diplomatic channels?" "We were following established protocols," Theron insisted. "Your protocols killed children," Grant said coldly. "While you sat in your comfortable chambers writing resolutions, families were being torn apart. Cities were burning. People were screaming for help. And you did nothing." High Chancellor Mevros slammed his hand on the podium. "We are a civilized galaxy. We do not resolve our problems through violence. We use diplomacy, negotiation, and patience." "How long should the Varani have been patient?" Grant asked. "Another week? Another month? How many more had to die before your patience ran out?" Ambassador Theron pointed an accusing finger at her. "Your species comes from a Class 12 death world. You evolved alongside predators and natural disasters. You know only violence because your planet breeds savages. You have brought your barbarism into space and you threaten everything we have achieved." For a moment, Grant was silent. Then she smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You're absolutely right, Ambassador. Earth is a death world. We have predators that can kill us in seconds. We have storms that can destroy entire cities. We have diseases that have killed millions. Our own planet tries to murder us regularly." She paused, looking up at each of the council members. "Do you know what that taught us? It taught us that survival requires 2 things, the ability to work together and the courage to fight when necessary. Yes, we know violence, But we also know when violence is the only answer left. You call us barbaric, but we're the only ones in this entire galaxy who had the backbone to answer when someone begged for help. This is outrageous. Chancellor Mevros sputtered. You cannot justify. Show them, Grant said quietly. Captain David Miller, standing beside her, activated a data transmission. Information flooded into the Council's systems. Messages. Communication logs. Desperate pleas. What is this? Theron demanded. Grant's voice was steady. Those are communications from 17 different species. The Drexery. The Voltan Union. The Sheenir Collective. 14 others. All of them have secretly contacted Earth in the past 3 weeks. All of them are begging for the same thing, protection. Protection from threats that the Council refuses to acknowledge. The chamber went silent. Every Council member was reading the data on their screens. Their faces showed shock, denial, and growing fear. This cannot be real, Chancellor Mevros whispered. It's very real, Captain Miller said. These species are terrified. The Krell Dominion has conquered 14 worlds in the past decade. Your response has been sanctions that don't work and warnings that are ignored. They're afraid and they know the Galactic Council will not help them. Ambassador Theron stood up, his voice shaking with anger. You are manipulating these species. Filling their heads with fear and paranoia. We're not manipulating anyone, Grant said. We're just offering what you refuse to give, real protection. The Virani have already signed a mutual defense treaty with Earth. 3 other species are drafting similar agreements. More will follow. You are tearing apart the Galactic Order. Chancellor Mevros accused. Grant's eyes hardened. No. We're exposing the truth that your order was built on a lie. You've convinced yourselves that peace means doing nothing while others suffer. You've made yourselves feel superior by calling us barbaric, but at least we have the honesty to admit when violence is necessary. She looked around at all of them, these powerful beings who ruled the galaxy. Your system is broken, she said simply. For 3,000 years, you've maintained your precious peace by looking the other way when species outside your club are attacked. You've built your comfort on the suffering of those you refuse to protect. The Virani learned that lesson when they called for help and you voted to let them die. What you are proposing is chaos. Theron shouted. No, Grant replied. What I'm proposing is accountability. We're not asking to join your council. We're building something different. An alliance of species who believe that peace means actually protecting the innocent, not just talking about it. The chamber descended into shouting. Council members argued with each other, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of anger and fear. Grant stood silently in her ceremonial chains, knowing that she had just changed the galaxy forever. She had come to this trial expecting to be condemned. But she had spoken a truth that could not be unspoken. The comfortable lie of the Galactic Council was crumbling, and a new order was being born. On the Krell throne world, deep in the heart of the Dominion, Fleet Marshal Kraxus stared at the holographic display with all 4 of his eyes. 3,000 warships floated in perfect formation around the planet. It was the largest military force the Krell had assembled in 5 centuries. The Terrans humiliated us at Varys 3, Kraxus said, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled rage. They destroyed 37 of our ships. They made us retreat. Now every species in the galaxy thinks the Krell Dominion is weak. This cannot stand. His second-in-command, a younger warrior named Thexus, studied the tactical data. Our intelligence reports indicate the Terrans have only one inhabited world. Their fleet is scattered across multiple defensive positions. They are vulnerable. Kraxus turned to face the assembled commanders. Then we will strike at their heart. We will destroy their homeworld. When Earth burns, the galaxy will remember that the Krell Dominion answers insults with annihilation. Prepare the Grand Armada for departure. The order rippled through 3,000 ships. Crews prepared for the longest military campaign in recent Krell history. Weapons were charged. Supplies were loaded. Within 3 cycles, the massive fleet entered faster-than-light travel, heading for a small yellow star that the Terrans called Sol. 6 months later, the Krell Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Marshal Kraxus looked at the blue and green planet on his screen. It looked peaceful. Beautiful. He would enjoy watching it die. Open a channel to all Terran frequencies, he commanded. The transmission broadcast across every radio, television, and computer on Earth. Kraxus's face appeared on billions of screens. Terrans, he said, his voice dripping with contempt, you dared to challenge the Krell Dominion. You destroyed our ships and freed our rightful property. Now you will pay the price. Watch as your world burns. Surrender now and we will make your deaths swift. The response came 30 seconds later from Admiral Michael Stone, commanding Earth's Orbital Defense Network. He was an older man with scars on his face from battles fought long ago. His voice was calm and cold. Marshal Craxus, I am Admiral Michael Stone of the Terran Defense Force. You have made a serious mistake coming here. You should have researched what happens when you threaten Deathworlders on their home planet. Welcome to Sol. It will be your grave. Craxus clicked his mandibles in amusement. Bold words for a dead man. All ships begin the attack. The Krell fleet surged forward. 3,000 warships moving as one massive wave of destruction. They expected to find a few orbital stations and a panicked population. They expected surrender within hours. They found something very different. Hidden weapon platforms throughout the asteroid belt suddenly powered up. Hundreds of them, built in secret over the past 6 months. They opened fire simultaneously, their missiles streaking through space like angry stars. The Krell's front line took devastating losses immediately. 50 ships were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. Marshal Craxus stared at his screen in disbelief. How did they build so many defenses so quickly? He demanded. Sir, we're detecting massive nuclear signatures throughout the inner system, his tactical officer reported. They've weaponized everything. Satellites, space stations, even civilian mining vessels. The Battle of Sol had begun, and it was nothing like the Krell expected. Human pilots flew their fighters with the same reckless courage they had shown at Varys 3. Captain Emma Roberts led her squadron through a cloud of Krell missiles, her voice steady over the radio. Stay tight. Focus fire on their command ships. Make every shot count. On Earth's surface, air raid sirens wailed in every city. But there was no panic. People moved to shelters in organized lines. Emergency services took their positions. Military units deployed to defensive positions. This was humanity's home and they would defend it with everything they had. The Krell began orbital bombardments. Their weapons carved burning scars across continents. Cities were struck. Millions died in the first hours. But humanity did not break. When Krell dropships landed ground forces, they found that Earth's cities had become fortresses. Every street was a kill zone. Every building held soldiers with weapons. Humans fought with a ferocity born from defending their families and homes. In the ruins of Beijing, Private Jack Harrison held a corridor against 12 Krell soldiers. His weapon was almost out of ammunition, but he did not retreat. You want this building? He shouted, firing his last rounds. Come and take it. The battle lasted 6 terrible days. Orbital strikes irradiated entire regions. Whole cities were reduced to rubble. The casualty count climbed into the millions. Earth's orbital defenses were slowly being overwhelmed. But the Krell were bleeding too. Their casualties mounted with each passing hour. They had never fought an enemy that simply refused to surrender. Every human position had to be taken by force. Every ship they destroyed took several Krell vessels with it. On the 6th day, Marshal Craxus looked at his casualty reports and felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. He had lost over 800 ships. His ground forces were bogged down in brutal urban warfare. The Terrans were still fighting with the same intensity as day 1. He opened a channel to Earth's command. Admiral Stone. We can end this. Surrender now and I will allow your people to live as servants of the Dominion. You have fought bravely but you cannot win. There was a long pause. Then Captain Emma Roberts' voice came over the channel instead. Her fighter squadron was engaging Krell ships near Mars. Marshal Craxus, this is Captain Roberts. Admiral Stone died 3 hours ago defending Orbital Station 7. But before he died he left orders for this exact situation. I'm authorized to give you our official response. She paused and when she spoke again her voice was hard as steel. You came to our home. You attacked our families. You should have studied what happens when you threaten Deathworlders in their den. There will be no terms. No surrender. No mercy. You wanted war with humanity? Now you have it. The human counteroffensive began immediately. Every remaining ship, every functional weapon platform, every fighter that could still fly, all of them attacked at once. Marshal Craxus realized his mistake too late. He had not come to conquer a world. He had walked into a trap built by predators defending their nest. The Krell Armada broke. The Krell Armada retreated from Sol, but the humans did not let them go. Admiral Rebecca Grant, who had returned from the Galactic Council just days before the attack, took command of the remaining Terran fleet. Her orders were simple and absolute. We follow them to every world they've conquered. We free every species they've enslaved. The Krell Dominion ends today. 40 human ships survived the Battle of Sol. They were damaged and their crews were exhausted, but they pursued the fleeing Krell across the galaxy. And they were not alone. Species from other death worlds joined them. The Drexery brought their heavy warships. The Voltan Union sent their fighters. Together they formed a coalition united by a single purpose. No more slavery, no more conquest, no more looking away while others suffered. Captain William Drake led the assault on the Krell throne world itself. His ship, the TDS Vengeful, was held together by emergency repairs and determination. When the Krell defenders opened fire, Drake's response was broadcast across all channels. This is for every world you destroyed. This is for every family you tore apart. This is for Earth. The battle was brutal but swift. The Krell, demoralized by their defeat at Sol, could not mount an effective defense. Within 2 days their capital had fallen. Fleet Marshal Craxus was captured trying to flee in a civilian transport. The Great Krell Dominion, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, collapsed in less than 3 months. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council faced its own crisis. The news of Earth's victory spread like wildfire. Species across the galaxy began questioning why they needed the Council at all. If these barbaric humans could defeat the Krell when the Council could not, what was the Council good for? Emergency sessions were called. Some Council members proposed declaring war on Earth and its new allies. They argued that humanity was dangerous, unpredictable, and would destabilize the entire galaxy. But before they could vote, something unexpected happened. Ambassador Lyra of the Verani requested permission to speak before the Council. She was young for her species, barely 30 cycles old, but she had survived the Krell occupation. She had watched her world burn while the Council debated. She walked into the Grand Chamber of Unity without invitation and stood in the center, where Admiral Grant had stood in chains just months before. "You do not have clearance to speak here," High Chancellor Mevros said sternly. "I do not care about your clearance," Lyra replied, her voice steady and strong. "I have something to say and the entire galaxy is watching this transmission. You can let me speak, or you can show everyone that you silenced the voices of those you failed to protect." The Chancellor hesitated, then nodded. Lyra looked up at the Council members, these powerful beings who had let her people die. "I was there when the Krell came," she began. "I watched them kill my mother. I watched them take my brother. I sent the distress call that reached Earth. And I watched each of you vote to do nothing." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You say the Terrans are barbaric. You say they are violent and dangerous. But I remember sitting in a shelter with my little sister, holding her while she cried, telling her that help was coming. I believed in your system. I believed the galaxy's great civilizations would save us." Her voice grew harder. "But you did not come. The Terrans came. These barbaric Deathworlders crossed the galaxy because a stranger asked for help. They lost 4,000 people saving mine. Captain Thomas Wright died ramming his ship into a Krell carrier to protect my city. What good is your peace if it only protects those comfortable enough to hide behind it?" The chamber was absolutely silent. "The Terrans are forming a new alliance," Lyra continued. "They call it the Mutual Defense Coalition. It has one simple rule: if you call for help, someone will answer. That is all. No complicated treaties. No voting on whether someone deserves to be saved. Just the promise that you will not face evil alone." She looked directly at High Chancellor Mevros. "The Verani have already joined. So have 9 other species. More will follow. Not because the Terrans are perfect, but because they understand something you have forgotten. That civilization is not measured by how peaceful you are in comfortable times. It is measured by whether you stand up when others are in danger." Lyra turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the Council descended into chaos. Some members called for her arrest. Others began arguing about reforms. Several species announced they were leaving the Council to join the Human Alliance. The old order was crumbling. 3 months later, Admiral Rebecca Grant stood on the rebuilt orbital platform above Earth. The planet below still showed scars from the Krell attack, but reconstruction was underway. Humanity had survived and they had changed the galaxy forever. She addressed the transmission being broadcast to 100 worlds. "We did not choose to be Deathworlders," she said. "We did not ask to be the ones who fight when others will not. But if that is what it takes to stand up when innocent people are suffering, then we will wear that title with pride." She paused, looking at the stars. "To every species watching this, you are not alone. If you are threatened, if you are afraid, if you need help, call us. The Mutual Defense Coalition will answer." 2 days later, a new distress signal reached Earth. A small mining colony on the edge of explored space was under attack by pirates. The Galactic Council had already voted to send a diplomatic delegation, in 6 months. Commander Peter Harrison took his ship, the TDS Resolute, and departed within hours. He opened a channel to the terrified colonists. "This is Commander Harrison of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. Help is on the way. Hold on. We're coming." The transmission ended, but the message was clear. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy, and they had brought something that had been missing for far too long: the simple courage to answer when someone called for help. The age of the Galactic Council's comfortable peace was over. The age of the Mutual Defense Coalition had begun. And across the stars, those who had lived in fear for so long finally had hope.